In this week's Torah portion, we read of the story of Abraham sitting at the tent and receiving the three malachim, the three angels. The Lord appeared to him by the terebinths of Mamre. He was sitting at the entrance of the tent as the day grew hot. Looking up, he saw three men standing near him. As soon as he saw them, he ran from the entrance of the tent to greet them, and bowing to the ground, he said, "Adonai, my lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant." The classic explanation of this verse is that he's talking to God. The angels, the messengers, come by his tent, and he says to them, "My lords." He says to the angels, "My lords." He invites them into his tent, and he does hachnasat orchim, hospitality. However, there's a very interesting interpretation of Rav that's found in two places in the Talmud, which understands the word Adonai not as talking to the messengers, but as talking to God. In other words, Abraham is having a conversation with the creator of the universe, with God, and he says to him, "Adonai, wait a minute. I have to receive my guests." In other words, hachnasat orchim, receiving guests into your home, is even more important than discussion with God. And this leads us to a very interesting tension throughout Jewish history, the history of Jewish law, which is how do you balance the tension between mitzvot shel ben adam lamakom, commandments between man and God, mitzvot shel ben adam lachavero, commandments between man and his fellow man. And by commandments in the first category, I mean Shabbat, Kashrut, the laws of Nidah, and studying Torah. And by mitzvot ben adam lachavero, we're talking about hachnasat orchim, welcoming guests, bikur cholim, visiting the sick, nichum avelim, comforting the mourner, and halavayat hamet, accompanying the dead to the grave. So there is that classic tension, and the question is, how should we deal with that tension? And in my opinion, most of the classic poskim and rabbis, when there was such a tension, they would usually err on the side of favoring the human being. In other words, they would try and look for a way to help the human being standing in front of them, even if it meant de-emphasizing our relationship with God. And I would like to illustrate this by two stories, even though there are many more stories that I could bring. The first is a story from the 20th century told by Rabbi Elliot Dorff in a number of places in his books about his father, who grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the chief Orthodox rabbi at the time in Milwaukee, his name was Rabbi Shlomo Scheinfeld. And one Friday afternoon, Elliot Dorff's father walks into the rabbi's study, and the rabbi is standing there holding a chicken, and there's a woman standing next to him. And as he's examining the chicken to decide whether the chicken is kosher or not, and remember this is Friday afternoon, so there's no time to replace or buy a new chicken, he's asking the woman all sorts of questions about her husband, his health, the economic situation of the family. And after looking at the chicken and hearing the woman's answers, he says the chicken is kosher, the woman leaves, and Rabbi Elliot Dorff's father, who's a young teenager, turns to the rabbi and says, "Why is that so important? Why did you ask the woman all sorts of questions about her economic status?" And Rabbi Scheinfeld replied by saying, if you think that the kashrut of chickens only has to do with the physical state of the chickens, then you understand nothing about halacha. In other words, the shikul musari, the ethical component in making a decision about the kashrut of a chicken, is just as important as the ritual component. He knew that if he said that that chicken was treif, this woman and her family would have nothing to eat for Shabbat. And therefore, he erred on the side of favoring a human being over ritual law. And the second example appears in a recent book by Chaim Vayera, a well-known Israeli author, which appeared last year in Hebrew. And he tells a story that took place in 1963 when he was a teenager in Jerusalem. And he's standing in a store in Mea Sharim before the holiday of Sukkot. And into the store walks Reb Aryeh Levin, the tzaddik of Jerusalem. And Reb Aryeh Levin very quickly takes his etrog, sticks it in his pocket, and leaves and runs away. And Chaim Be'er runs after him. And he says, "Reb Aryeh, I don't understand. All the people in the store are looking at their etrog through a magnifying glass, and you take the etrog, stick it in your pocket, and run away? How come?" And Reb Aryeh says, there are two mitzvot in the Torah that use the verb hadar, which means glory. One is pri-eitz hadar, the fruit of the beautiful tree, which is an etrog. And the other is v'hadarta pnei zaken, you shall have respect and love for an elderly human being. Rabbi Aryeh says, I'm on my way to deliver a pair of dentures to an old man in an old age home. And I know that if I don't get there in time, he will not be able to eat his supper. And therefore I decided to favor the mitzvah of v'hadarta pnei zaken, of honoring the elder, to the mitzvah of pre-Eitz Adar. Excuse me, I have to run for the number 11 bus. So we see from these two stories, from the story of Reb Shlomo Scheinfeld in the United States and Rabbi Aryeh Levine in Jerusalem, that they felt that mitzvot ben adam lechavero are even more important than mitzvot ben adam lamakom. Unfortunately, in Israel today, the religious establishment represented by the chief rabbinate almost always favors mitzvot ben adam lamakom over mitzvot ben adam lechavero. And that is why they give a hard time to agunot and to converts and to young couples who wish to get married. And we all know many of these stories. On the other hand, there are rabbis in all the streams in Judaism today in Israel, Reform, Conservative, Modern Orthodox, who feel that mitzvot ben adam lechavero, ethical commandments, must be emphasized and are sometimes even more important than ritual commandments. I can only hope and pray that in the future in the state of Israel, we have more rabbis like Rabbi Scheinfeld and Rabbi Aryeh Levine. Shavua Tov from Schechter.